Good morning, members. We have already formed a quorum. It is also time to start the meeting. So let's move to the first step. And in relation to the meeting, I think we need to follow the fourth appendix to the House rules so as to elect a chair. Nominations, please. Mr. Sin Chung Kai, Charles Mock. We have got 3 here, so I second. Mr. Mock, do you accept the nomination? Yes, please. So please move forward to take over the chairmanship. Thank you. I think the next item on the agenda is to invite the administration to join us. Thank you very much. From the administration, we have got a number of officials here to help us to explain the subsidiary legislation and answer our questions. First of all, we have Mr. Joe Wong from the Commerce and Economic Development Bureau, Mr. Ivanhoe Jiang, PS, Ms. Carmen Kwok, Senior Government Counsel from the Department of Justice, Mr. Kingsley Yeung, and Mr. Sander Check, both from the Office of the Communications Authority. I understand that members have already received a set of the relevant papers, so I'd like to give the floor to the administration. Please brief us on the following. That is the Telecommunications Determining Spectrum Utilization Fees by Auction Amendment Regulation 2012 and Telecommunications Designation of Frequency Bands subject to the payment of Spectrum Utilization Fee Amendment Order 2012. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To tie in with the needs of the development of the mobile industry, the Communications Authority would like to, by way of auction, make available 50 gigahertz of spectrum. By this, we are able to allow them to provide 4G service or wireless mobile service. To make sure that the auction can be organized, we need to amend 2 pieces of subsidiary legislation so as to set the details concerning the spectrum utilization fee and also the holding of an auction. We understand that by having the SUF in this way, we can make sure that there will be effective use of the spectrum. And then the determination of the SUF by auction is a way to make available the spectrum in an efficient way. So usually we use this method to designate the frequency bands. Since 2001, we have had 7 auctions to make available to the market 370 megahertz of spectrum. And the former Communications Authority, or rather the former Telecommunications Authority, conducted a 2-month pre-consultation to solicit views from the industry. Early this year, we consulted the views of the Electrical Panel on Information Technology and Broadcasting. Members did not raise any objection to the proposals. if the amendments are to be endorsed, we believe that in the first quarter of 2013, we can hold the auction of the spectrum. If you've got any questions, myself and my colleagues will be more than happy to answer them. All right, members, any questions? Mr. Sin Chung Kai. Forgive me, I've been away for a period of time. I might have forgotten certain details. Do you impose any restrictions on the bidders? Does it mean that only licensees may participate in the auction? What about a non-licensee? Will a non-licensee be allowed to take part in the auction? Will it be an open auction or is it a tender exercise? And in the paper, it is said that you have an additional frequency band, 2635 to 2666 megahertz. What was it previously used for? And then for the other one, 2515 to 2540, I think last year part of it was already auctioned. Why is it that you have to auction another part of it? Well, it is an auction. It is not a tender. As to the details of the auction, maybe Mr. Chair can supplement. Mr. Chairman, members, currently this frequency band has not been put to any particular use. In year 2009, we did make this available. That is the 2.5, 2.6 gigahertz band for auction. But then at that time, there were still some technical issues that had to be taken up with the mainland authorities in relation to coordination. And so this particular part was not included in the auction. Now, we have already coordinated the matter technologically, so this other part will also be made available. Currently, it is not put to any use. As to the auction arrangements, Mr. Sin Chung Kai asked whether there would be any restrictions on the participants of the auction. We don't. In other words, existing licensees as well as mobile service operators who are non-licensees may also take part. In other words, AT&T may come over to join. Well, the only requirement is a very low threshold. In other words, they have to give us the application details, they have to provide a bond, and then there will be a very relaxed set of fitting requirements, and then they can join. Yes, if I may also add a word here, I think the previous participant who got the frequency at the last auction, again, he was a newcomer. It was a newcomer to the market. Mr. Chek talked about the technical requirements. I think in July last year, you issued a statement. I think probably in that document, you have already explained about the technical issue involved between Hong Kong and mainland and why you can make it available now. So perhaps members may want to refer to the paper issued on the 4th of July last year. No, 4th of July this year. I always mix it up. You talked about year 2009, but then in the electrical brief in paragraph 3, you talk about... please speak closer to the mic. We can't hear you, Mr. Sin. I'm sorry about that. In paragraph 3 of your paper, you talk about the plan published on the 19th of December 2011, and you refer to 2515 to 2540. Has it been auctioned? Mr. Chairman, members, for the information in paragraph 3, we have coordinated with the mainland authorities, and then on the 19th of December last year, we made an announcement, and we published the spectrum release plan, and this particular band was formally included, and that started the consultation exercise in relation to the auction. In year 2009, we talked about the entire stretch of 2.5, 2.6 gigahertz band is very wide, and in the year 2009, the available parts were already auctioned. So, according to your regulation, Part 4A, you talk about 2635 to 2660. This one hasn't been auctioned. That's the part we want to auction, 2515 to 2540. But how come that you only mention 2635 to 2660 in your subsidiary legislation? Because the other part of 2515 to 2540, there were no technical coordination problems, and so it was already in the plan. So this isn't mentioned here.
And Chairman, I would like to ask a follow-up question. A new operator may bid for the 50 megahertz. Is that enough for his use? In fact, in 2009, Chairman, we had an auction, and a total of 90 megahertz was auctioned, and there were 3 successful bidders. Each successful bidder was allocated 30 megahertz, and all of them have launched 4G services. So technically speaking, 30 megahertz is enough for a new operator to enter the market. Any other questions? Yes, Ms. Elizabeth Quat. So how many operators do you expect will be using the 50 megahertz or sharing the 50 megahertz? Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Quat. From a technical point of view, the 50 megahertz can be allocated to existing licensees or newcomers or a mixture of the two. Now, say, for example, an existing licensee may have 30 megahertz, and technically, if an existing licensee gets an extra 10 megahertz, then that would mean more effective and efficient use. Because for 4G mobile technology, using LTE standards, the maximum spectrum band is 20 times 2. And that is why there are technical reasons for existing licensees to obtain 10 more megahertz. But then for a new operator, if he gets 30 megahertz or even less, he can still enter the market because from a technical point of view, a minimum of 10 megahertz would suffice. And that's why we have 5 sections, each of 10 megahertz, and so there is flexibility for existing licensees and new operators to take part in the auction. Ms. Quat? And for how long will they be able to make use of the radio of the spectrum? 15 years. The license will last for 15 years. Mr. Sin Chung Kai, do you allow secondary trading, for example, swapping, reselling, or is it that if they no longer need the frequency bands, they need to hand them back to the government? Are there any resale restrictions? We, at the moment, don't have a secondary market as such. In fact, we have got consultancy reports. We've made reference to overseas experience. And in fact, our office has communicated with existing licensees to assess their demand. Now, in fact, they merely want more megahertz. No one has the intention to sell the megahertz he or she has. And so that's not really our primary concern. Our understanding is that existing operators do have a huge demand for the spectrum, and they are using their existing spectrum fully. So there is no secondary market. But under the present license conditions, are they allowed to sell their spectrum freely in the market? I understand that this is a hypothetical question, but what if existing licensees no longer need to use the spectrum? Do they need to return the spectrum to the Telecommunications Authority before the spectrum can be sold or auctioned again? Yes, Chairman, perhaps I can introduce the existing legal framework to members concerning the designation of wireless spectrum. This must be approved by the Telecommunications Authority. So basically, licensees cannot do trading among themselves without the approval of the Telecommunications Authority or the Communications Authority. But then this relates to the designation of spectrum. But then, concerning existing licensee, it can be acquired by another company, or this licensee may be merged with another company. And so such mergers are governed by the merger and acquisition regulation. So in other words, basically the licensee still owns the spectrum, and so there is no question of trading of the spectrum. So, but under the law, buying and selling of the spectrum must be approved by the Communications Authority. Ms. Sit Ho, I want to follow up on Mr. Sin Chung Kai's question. I don't think it's really a purely hypothetical question. It's true that we haven't seen trading of spectrum in the market, but then there can be such acts. But in fact, acquisition and merger of such companies have already occurred. The administration said that all transactions had to be approved by the Communications Authority. But Mr. Sin's question is whether the licensee has to return the spectrum to you first, and then you can auction the spectrum again, or is it that if there are mergers and acquisitions, you need to be informed and there is no need for your approval? Now, I want to say that under the law, two parties cannot enter into negotiations, come to an agreement, and then inform the Communications Authority of the transaction. But then concerning such transactions and the implications of such transactions, we need to really study these issues and the implications. In fact, the administration has engaged a consultant to study these issues, and these issues are extremely complex. So it really depends on whether there is such a demand in the market. So the administration knows that there may be this possibility. So I want to know about the study. Are there any findings? No. Has the outcome been published? Is it that the study has been completed? Why is it that the findings are not made open? Is it that nobody has asked you about the outcome of the study? So perhaps we'll ask you now to announce the outcome of the study. Now, in fact, the study is still going on, and I have to go back and seek advice as to whether sensitive information is included in the report. But then our understanding is that the study has been completed. So first of all, Ms., can you clarify whether the study has been completed? Now, such studies are funded by taxpayers' money. Now, I understand that when it comes to bidding, tendering, then of course there is sensitive information involved. But then we are only asking about the framework, the regulatory framework. So, Chairman, I hope, or I I feel that the consultancy study report should be released to the public. Now, I understand that there are some in the market who are concerned, and they hope that in the future there can be a sound framework or mechanism for spectrum transaction in the market. So perhaps you can go back and see whether the report can be released, or whether you can issue an open statement on the future policy of the Communications Authority. Chairman, now of course people do agree that the auctioning of the spectrum is fair, but then what about transactions afterwards? I think you should make the whole set of rules known so that people will know whether spectrum no longer used should be returned to the Communications Authority for future auctioning, or whether there can be transactions in the market. Now, we have seen a number of cases of merger and acquisition, and as a result, the spectrum is also transferred to the new company. And we're told that such cases will be dealt with under the merger and acquisition regulations under the Telecommunications Ordinance. But then will you also look at the issue of the transfer of this spectrum? And then, as you know, for the 3G spectrum, the 15-year period will come to an end soon. And these companies will have to hand back the 3G spectrum. So is it that they have to hand them back to the Communications Authority, or is it that there can be transactions in the market? I just want to say that all these issues are interrelated. Chairman, I hope that we can follow up on the matter in the ITB panel. Yes, I will relay the suggestion to the chairman and the deputy chairman of the panel. We want to have some discussion on the handling of the spectrum. Mr. Chair? Now, of course, designation of spectrum, allocation of spectrum has to be approved by the Communications Authority. But then concerning SUF is also involved, and SUF is something that the Secretary can decide. Are you talking about Mr. Greg So? Yes, Mr. Greg So, Secretary for Commerce and Economic Development. So, Mr. Wong, do you have anything to add? Now, of course, we need to study further the issue of possible transactions of spectrum. But then, even if we are to come up with a policy, we'll not just announce it all of a sudden. We will go through proper consultation. The consultancy study is to provide us with internal reference. We especially are interested in overseas experience. Now, in fact, previously, we in the budget exercise asked policy bureaus how much money they were spending on consultancy studies, because such consultancy studies can help us understand what policies the government is contemplating. And policy bureaus have been very cooperative. They have been providing us with the list of consultancy studies underway. newspaper, that I hope that this bureau can also give us a list of the consultancy studies. Yes, we want the consultancy study report to be released. So can you go back and ask whether this can be done? And I think we have a consensus, and I hope that we'll not have to move a motion with no legal effect. Mr. Sin, now according to the background brief prepared by the Secretariat since 2011, $12 billion have been received in total. And then concerning the off-the-trading fund report, in 2012, we were told that the dividend was $115 million. So you now hold about $1 billion worth of assets. And with the auctioning of the spectrum, as outlined in this paper, I would like to know whether there is room to transfer some of the benefits to members of the public. I understand that the Communications Authority gives dividends to the government twice a year, and it is sitting on $1 billion worth of assets. I don't know what the latest amount is because you don't give us returns on a monthly basis. This is based on your 2011-2012 annual report. So can I ask this question? Now, you're going to have this auction exercise, and as a result, you'll get further revenue. So is there any room to return some of the benefits to consumers?
If I may, first of all, deal with the figures, and then Mr. Chair can supplement. I think your background brief is quite up to date, but in fact, the figure is a bit larger than this one. It's 12.5 billion. And it is 560 megahertz. If we add the latest figure to the ones in your background brief, understand that the CA has been reviewing the SUF all the time to see whether there's room to make adjustments. I think it is something which is being done regularly. Perhaps Mr. Church can tell you whether he's got anything to add. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me first of all clarify the SUF resulting from the spectrum auction. The money doesn't go to the operating fund of the CA. It goes to the general revenue. So the auction of this spectrum has got nothing to do with our operation. And then, as Mr. Wong had said, from time to time, we review our financial position. And in the light of our financial position, we'll consider whether we can make adjustments to the license fees. Well, basically, for the office of the CA, the revenue of the fund, of the trading fund, comes from the license fees. We used to have surplus because the license fee income has been higher than expected, and that's why with the surplus, we are restricted by the laws, so we can't give the surplus directly to the consumers. We can only make adjustments to the license fees. We have just completed a public consultation exercise. Our recommendation is to adjust downwards the license fee levels. We've completed the consultation, and we intend to come to a conclusion in November, and then maybe in December we will give a report to the panel of the electrical broadcasting and information technology panel. Well, if I may add a word, when you talk about the license fees, that's about the distribution of the numbers. Well, it depends on the size of the patrons and also the number of the telephone numbers. And if they have got the spectrum, then there is this management fees. If I may add a word here, well, in fact, you charge how much for a telephone number? $3. I think if you can reduce it, probably the magnitude is not great, and then you can sort of return the benefit to the consumers. I just wondered if you can have reductions, and then you can try to urge the operators to benefit the consumers. Perhaps the public do have expectation in this regard. Mr. Wong, if I may just emphasize one more point. The SUF income goes to the general revenue rather than the trading fund of the office of the CA. The office of the CA is operated on the basis of a trading fund. It has got its own set of accounts, but then the SUF revenue goes to the general revenue. Yes, competition is very keen, and so the revenue from the license fees is quite good. But I need to say that as far as the service fees for the mobile service industry, I think around the world we can claim that we are on the low side. There are 180 countries and regions, and we rank 4th in terms of the cheapest mobile fees, and you can see that it is very efficient. Well, can you make it clear in relation to the figures concerning the trading fund? Well, for the trading fund, for the latest report, we say that we have a $1 billion development surplus. This is to provide as a buffer in case in future we want to increase the license fees and to facilitate our operation. We will regularly review the possibility of reducing the license fees. Members, any other questions? After this auction, what is your estimate? When are you going to auction next? Do you have something longer term? Mr. Chairman, let me answer this question. For this auction, after it's been held, we believe that we may not have another frequency band for auction in the future 2-3 years. So we expect quite keen participation in this auction, because the frequency band made available will be available for the 4G market. After we've completed with this auction, we'll just check whether the International Telecommunications Union has got any new ideas. But to me, I think in the future 2 or 3 years' time, we may not be able to come up with new frequency bands. Mr. Sin Chung Kai, just want to check whether I've got it right or wrong. I think last time you auctioned 90 megahertz, and 3 operators have been using them. I think it's already in the public domain. Do you mind telling us who they are? The 3 operators. The first one is China Mobile. The second one is CSL. The third one is a new one, Genius Span. Basically, it's Hutchison and PCCW, or you call it the Hong Kong T. So the 3 licensees took part, and they have already been using the frequency to provide service. So at the retail level, China Mobile, CSL, PCCW, and Hutchison. So they have already launched the service. 09 in 09. Are there any other questions? Does it mean that the existing frequency band is already available for the new service, LT, or do they have to bid for new frequency bands? Thank you, Mr. Sin, for your question. We have been adopting a technology-neutral position in the former auctions, so existing licensees may use their existing frequencies to upgrade their service network and provide new service by upgrading their technology. SmartTone is one of the 5 major operators. Last time it did not succeed in getting any frequency band in the auction. As a result of this, they used some of the 2G frequency, which falls into the 1,800 MHz band, and they have some mock LT network, and they have been using the LT network in the 1,800 MHz band to provide the relevant service. Are there any other questions? I have some questions to follow up. In July this year, you issued a paper. It is quite clear, and you have put forward a number of questions, and you have come back with the view of the CA's office as well as the views of the licensees. The process is very transparent, but still, even though some licensees have come up with different views, and there is a lot of difference among the views submitted, but the Bureau will still adhere to the principles that you have been adopting for the handling of the frequency band. I think most of them are legitimate and justified. Sometimes some licensees may think that perhaps there should be some changes to certain principles. For example, this paper is about the 2.5, 2.6 gigahertz. If probably you would only make a decision in accordance with your existing principles despite their submissions. But then we have to deal with certain complex issues, and we have to deal with the handling of the spectrum as a whole, like the duration. Currently, you tell the licensee that they cannot expect priority in getting renewal upon expiry at the end of 15 years. Now, back to the same point. For 3G, I think for all the service operators and consumers, I think it is going to have a huge impact on them. I don't know how many people are still using 2G, but to the majority of the clients, they're using 3G. So it is going to have an impact on them. For the forthcoming consultation exercises, I want to know whether the Bureau is going to conduct a public consultation. I think it should not be confined to the industry. Now it is 2.5, 2.6, so only the industry is interested. But if you talk about the entire spectrum, probably the public would also be interested. So are you going to consult the public on a wider scope, because there may be fundamental changes? If I may add a word here first, that is in relation to the policy to manage the spectrum. In year 2007, the Bureau has formally published it. As to the question of reasonable expectation, again, we have already made it clear that there shouldn't be any expectation. And if there is to be redesignation of the spectrum, at that time we said that if there is a competitive demand, then basically we would like to rely on the market mechanism unless there is a overriding public policy reason to depart from it. So for the management of the spectrum, the policy itself has been clearly spelled out. Just now, Mr. Mock, you talked about the redesignation of the 3G. I think this is a specific issue, and 3G covers quite a lot of clients. And that's why last year we had a phase 1 consultation. I think Mr. Mock must be clear that we put forward a few options. We are now considering which one should be the preferred one. And we hope that very soon we will have another stage of consultation, and then we can be clearer about the direction. I will check with Mr. Church if there's anything to be added by the Office of the CA. The only thing I want to add is that for the first phase of the public consultation, it was completed in July. We received certain submissions, as both the chair and other members have given us valuable comments. They will be taken on board as well. We'll just see if we can provide more specific ideas in the second stage consultation for the public and the industry. Are there other questions? No? All right. So in this case, I would like to thank the officials from the administration for attending our meeting. The clerk reminds me to invite the administration to explain the regulation and the order to us, so as to make sure that members haven't got other questions.
All right.
我即係楊生。
Mr. Young. Thank you. So there are two amendments. We are proposing to add Part 4A, to add 2635 to 2660. And we hope that as a result we can receive the SUF. And then 106AC will also insert Part 4A, so that the SUF level can be determined by auction. So in fact the amendment is very simple. It's just to specify that it's a megahertz 2635 to 2660. Any questions? No?
就跟住落嚟啦。我諗我哋
So we have to decide on the following. Now we do have a legislative timetable, and after today's meeting, as members have raised some questions, do you think it's necessary for us to meet the industry? Mr. Sin, I don't think this is necessary. This will go to auction. If nobody is interested, then the government can continue to make use of the spectrum. Ms. Sit Ho, I don't think it is necessary to meet deputations. If there is no change to the auctioning arrangements, then I believe the industry is well versed with the arrangements. But I hope that, Chairman, you will report to the House Committee that the subcommittee is of the view that the consultancy report on spectrum transaction should be released, and I hope that such a request can be put on record, and then we'll follow up on whether the Secretary is willing to make public that report. I also think there is no need to invite deputations to come to give their views or comments. In fact, I understand that the industry has been consulted and they don't have any specific views. But then members have asked questions not merely about this present auctioning exercise. We are concerned about the long-term policies. So I don't think there's a need to invite deputations to come, but then we will ask the panel to follow up on the issue of spectrum policies. So in the panel will continue to follow up. So I don't think we need to fix the date for another meeting. Do we have AOB items, please? Members, with regard to the legislative timetable, the scrutiny period will expire on the 21st of November. But of course, that can be extended to the 12th of December. But if we do not seek an extension of the scrutiny period, we need to go to a House committee next week. We need to report on the deliberations to the House committee next week. But then before we go to House committee, we have a period for members to move amendments, and the deadline is the 14th of November. Chairman, so perhaps we can allow the administration some time to reply to members' questions, and after we have received the information, we can report to House committee. So, Chairman, will you please move a motion on the 14th of November during the sitting to extend the scrutiny period till the 12th of December? Mr. Sin, when will the administration auction the spectrum? Will extending the scrutiny period cause any delay? We hope to issue documents on applying to take part in the auction at the end of the year. And so the auction can take place in January next year, the earliest. So our plan is to have the auction in the first quarter of next year. Now, we want the administration to release the consultancy report. But then, strictly speaking, the release of the report is not related to the auctioning of 2.5, 2.6 gigahertz band. So can we go to a House committee without having to wait for the administration's reply? This can be done if members so agree. Florian, speaker is not coming through.
I
think our concerns can be followed up by the panel, as I believe all members do agree. Mr. Wong, I think this is a simple amendment, and if members agree, we hope that the subsidiary legislation can be passed first, and then meanwhile we'll look at the report to see whether there is any part which must be kept confidential, and I don't think 1 week will be enough for our work. And so I hope that members can pass the subsidiary legislation first, and then we can come back to members concerning the consultancy report. All right? So I think we can adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.